spiritual director, I love asking people questions. I like to ask them open-ended questions that help us to explore who they are, how they're connected to themselves, to God, and to others, how they're connected to the whole world, everything that is. And in the asking of those questions and listening deeply to those answers, we often discover new things about the person I'm listening to. I learn about them, they learn about themselves, and we grow together. That's awfully different, though, than the way we tend to ask questions when we meet someone new. When we meet someone new, especially in social settings like congregations, workplaces, clubs, and activities, there's a fairly short list of questions that we are trained to ask in an American context. And that list of questions reveals more about who has power and who doesn't, who's in and who's out, and helps us to see where we fit in that power structure with the person we're talking to. You know these questions. They're familiar to you. These are the questions you probably yourself have been asked and asked others many, many times. So what do you do? It's such a common question. And yet focusing immediately on what people do for work devalues unpaid work that's done in our community that's vital, whether that's parenting, childcare, volunteering of other forms. On top of that, asking people what they do for work is really getting at a series of interlocking social structures. How educated is this person? How much power do they have? How much money do they have? What other assumptions can I make about them and who they are in relationship to me with this one simple question? Finally, when we focus on work in this way, we take one part of our week, one part of our lives, and we make it the sole focus of identity for the person that we're engaged with. This can be so tricky. Have you ever been that person who walked into a party and looked at someone and said, "So, how do you avoid starvation?" We work for a variety of reasons, and some of them are built into our basic survival, like paying bills and getting the food and the shelter that we need. Every time we focus on this as a key function of identity, we disregard the people who do not have enough, who are unsustained, who are left out no matter how hard they work. As an alternative question, some of the ones that I love to use that help me understand more deeply who someone is beyond what they do to punch a clock are questions like, what matters to you? That gets us into the realm of values and desires and hopes. What's your passion? Sometimes a person has a hobby or an avocation that is so much more interesting than what they do with their day job. Their day job is there to pay the bills and keep them alive. But their hobby, their thing that they do in their other time, that's where they truly come alive. And it's a wonderful thing to hear about. How do you care for this community? Let's take time to honor the fact that not everyone cares for their community through paid work. And not only do these acts of selfless love deserve to be celebrated, but also we deserve to appreciate them as true work. So is someone a stay-at-home parent? Is someone a community volunteer? Is somebody someone who watches their neighbor's children just as a favor? All of this work is valuable. All of it deserves to be cherished. And what's more, the ways that people serve voluntarily often help us understand rather deeply who they are. Two other questions that often are interlocked that have a similar effect to the "what do you do" question. Are you married? Do you have a family? By which oftentimes people mean, do you have children? Sometimes they'll be more blunt and ask that directly, do you have children? But when they say, do you have a family? And what they really mean is, do you have biological offspring? It can be so painfully off-putting to people who don't, won't, or aren't planning on having their own children, or even adopting. It also means that we are leaving singles people who feel perfectly satisfied and called to a single life on the curb. These questions help us to establish a framework about status, social location, privilege, patriarchy, and even something called amatonormativity. This idea that one romantic partner is the most important person in your life. All of these things are norms and conceptions, but they're not the full sweep of human life. So when we lead with these questions about are you married, do you have a family, we often leave out the fact that there are people who are married and never want to have children. That there are people who are perfectly happy being single. That there are people who have partnerships and chosen families made up not of biological relatives, but of dear friends and people who have shown up for them time and time again. Some alternatives to get to know people a little better. Why not try who's in your circle? And if that's not something that makes much sense to people, it could be really awesome to ask them, who's someone that shows up for you all the time? Who's someone you show up for all the time? A wonderful way to explore connections with partners and friends and others who make up someone's family, even if that family may not fit traditional boundaries. Tell me about your household. It could be that someone lives alone, or that they live with their pets, or perhaps they live with a roommate or a platonic partner. They might live in mixed housing with other members of their family, with brothers, sisters, siblings, with nieces and nephews. There's a lot of ways in which people might construct their household, and it could be really fascinating to find out about that. Who feels like family to you? That's a really powerful question, because sometimes the people that feel most like family to us do come from our biological or extended family, but other times the people who feel most like family are the ones that we have found and chosen to spend our lives with, and that for some reason we've connected across all the impossibility that there is for two strangers to meet and feel like they're family. It does happen. What's connection to community look like? Sometimes people find their family in the communities they participate in, whether that's a group activity or a church or another faith community. It could be a volunteer group that they serve with. It might even be a very purposeful community that gathers for one particular thing. Hobbyists, like folks who love to go birding, or people who like to hike, or people who all share in the same needlecraft. That can become community. Getting to know people through the ways they're connected to others is really powerful. And of course, let's not forget, a household, a life, a family, can be made up of plants and pets and friends, peers, extended, chosen family, partners, and more. When we stick to the old script, we may often get the answers we're hoping to hear. But sometimes what we're saying to people is that if you can't really answer this question, then you don't really belong here. Let's do better. Let's ask more interesting questions and get to know the people we meet better, so that we have the chance not only to learn more deeply about them, but to enter into relationships where we can share our authentic selves too. Because none of us should feel left out simply because of the way we create our circle of adventurers.